Thousands in Bangladesh are protesting against the decisions of a war crimes tribunal. It was set up to investigate those accused of abuses during the 1971 Independence War. Some say the trials are politically motivated, and others demand no less than the death penalty for those convicted. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. Well, hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshis have been staging daily protests in the heart of the capital, Dhaka. They're angry about the trials and sentencing of politicians accused of atrocities in Bangladesh's so-called War of Independence with Pakistan. The protests show how deeply Bangladesh's bloody past still affects the present. The government has been prosecuting defendants accused of war crimes in 1971 for more than 2 years now. Earlier this month, a special tribunal hearing the case sentenced the main defendant, Abdul Qadir Mullah, to life imprisonment. The protesters say they want the death penalty and are asking for his sentence to be appealed. Well, let's take a look at the man who is the subject of so much anger in Bangladesh. Abdul Qadir Mullah is the leader of Jamaat-e-Islami, the largest Islamic party in Bangladesh. Mullah became known as the Butcher of Mirpur for the atrocities he is said to have committed as a senior leader of Razakar force during the 1971 war. And on February the 5th, he was finally convicted for 5 out of 6 charges that included mass murder and rape. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but many Bangladeshis say he should have been given the death penalty. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by our 3 guests from London. Muhammad Abu Bakr Mullah, a barrister and spokesman for the Jamaat-e-Islami group. Also from London, Abbas Fayez, senior researcher on South Asia for Amnesty International. And joining us on the line from Dhaka, Shahriar Kabir, acting president of the Forum for Secular Bangladesh. Shahriar is a protester and member of the Victims of War group. Thank you all for being with us. Shahriar Kabir, if I could start with you. These are the biggest rallies in Bangladesh that we've seen for at least 2 decades. Hundreds of thousands of protesters, just like yourself, gathering in the Bangladesh capital. Why is this such an important issue for so many Bangladeshis?
You see, you have to know the background of this campaign, this movement. Since the Holocaust of Second World War, the most brutal genocide in the history of the mankind took place in Bangladesh during the 9-month-long Liberation War of 1971. According to the official statistics, the Pakistani occupation army and the local collaborators, mainly Jamaat-e-Islami, killed roughly 3 million unarmed innocent people, sexually harassed 200,000 women, and forced 10 million hapless people to desert the country. More than 2 million people were physically assaulted and tens of millions were displaced inside the country. You see, the Pakistani occupation forces could never have committed such ruthless genocide, crimes against humanity or war crimes had they not been abetted by the killing squad of Razakar al-Badr and al-Shams formed by the Jamaat-e-Islami and their associates. So right after liberation, family members of the 3 million martyrs of the liberation war, conscious citizens and the international community sought the trial of those responsible for this cruel genocide and the recent history of the war, and the war crimes and crimes against humanity that took place in 1971. The government of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, which led the war of liberation, enacted a law and initiated a process of trial. But unfortunately, after the brutal assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in 1975, General Ziaur Rahman assumed power and he annulled collaboration order, thereby putting a stop to the trial of the war criminals. Since then, you see the victims of the war, the victims of the genocide and the conscious citizens, they are campaigning for this trial. And in 1992, one of the mother of a martyr, who lost her husband and his only son in the war, Jahanara Imam led a civil society movement for the trial of the war criminals. So for the last 21 years, we are campaigning, and eventually, people has voted, the people, Bangladeshi people have voted Awami League as
right.
the Grand Alliance.
But as we said it,
now government has taken initiative for the trial.
as we said at the top there, as we said at the beginning this man has been convicted of most of the charges that he was facing, and he's been given a life sentence. And I noticed in some of the pictures that we were running there, many of the protesters, many of them quite young, many of them that hadn't even been born when all of these atrocities are alleged to have been committed. So my point is that he has been found accountable to some degree. Why are there so many people who are demanding the death penalty? Why is a life sentence not enough for this man, in your opinion?
Well, you see, for the heinous crime like genocide and war crimes or crimes against humanity, what we think, according to our judicial system, we have a death penalty in our judicial system. And there are many countries that have this death penalty in their judicial system, including Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and many countries, including US also. So what we feel that if one man is killed, you can get he can be put for the trial and he can face the capital punishment. But those who are responsible for killing 3 million people, how come we expect that will be only life sentence? And here in Bangladesh, the past record is not very well. When Ziaur Rahman initiated, Bangabandhu, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman initiated the trial, and there were 73 tribunals were set up at that time, and many people were convicted. But when Ziaur Rahman assumed power, he repealed the Collaborators Act, and he released all those, killers and who were already sentenced to death and suffering in the who were in the prison waiting for the trial. He released all of them. So this culture of impunity is very much there. And Ziaur Rahman also enacted this what is this called, the law not to try the killers of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
All right, I want to get the view then of Muhammad Abu Bakr, who is from Jamaat al-Islami. Stay on the line with us if you can, Shahriar, because I want to turn back to you on some of the other issues surrounding this. But Muhammad, if I could turn to you on this, let me ask you first of all, do you believe that this man is guilty of what he's been accused of?
None of them are guilty. None of the Jamaat leaders who are behind the bar and who has been sentenced, none of them are guilty. And it is a media propaganda actually run by for long time by Mr. Shahriar Kabir and his colleagues. And Shahriar Kabir has given the distorted fact to the Al Jazeera today. Actually, Jamaat leaders were not arrested after the Liberation War for war crimes. Bangladesh government has forgiven, according to the Tri-Party Act 1974, the identified war criminals of Pakistan, who are identified and who are supposed to be prosecuted and tried for the war crimes in 1971, war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide. But the three foreign ministers of 3 countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, has come to an agreement. It is called a Tri-Party Act 1974. So none of the Jamaat leaders who are identified after the Liberation War for crimes against humanity and war crimes, some of the Jamaat leaders were identified for, as a collaborators, and they were not found guilty, and they were released from the and so the information he has given to the audience, to the Al Jazeera, is totally wrong, and it is a very false propaganda he's doing to the international world, that Jamaat leaders were found guilty. None of them were found guilty. No, none of them were prosecuted. Once you have forgiven the members of the defense forces of Pakistan who are identified, how can you try the members of the political party who are just civilian for the war crimes against humanity? And Ziaur Rahman did not release or Ziaur Rahman did not forgive any one of the war criminals. War criminals were forgiven by the Tri-Party Act, paragraph 14 and 15, and it was mentioned on paragraph 14 of the Tri-Party Agreement that Bangladesh can forget and forgive, and paragraph 15, and it is mentioned down there that Bangladesh has decided not to proceed the trials of the identified war prisoners of war. So it is a settled issue.
All
and
right.
after 42 years of the liberation,
All right, let's
after 42 years of the liberation, because of the political reason, Bangladesh Awami League has brought this issue back to uproot the Islamic political parties from the Bangladesh.
all right,
It is not because.
Let's. I appreciate your opinions on this, but I want to bring in Abbas Faiz now and get his take on all of this. You've heard the views of both sides of this issue. What is clearly a very emotive issue. Where do you think the truth lies here then? And has the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina opened up something that threatens the very stability of the country now?
We need to create a context for this, because there are two aspects to these trials. One is that we want a trial of the people who had been responsible for some very serious and mass-scale human rights violations during the 9 months from March to December 1971. So during that period, the reports that we have looked at indicate that as many as 1 million people may have been killed. Some reports indicate that the number is even higher. Tens of thousands of women, and some people saying that more than 200,000 people have been raped or subjected to serious violence, gender-based violence. And more than 8 million people, they have fled Bangladesh in search of safety over the border into India. So these are really very serious and mass-scale human rights violations. And the victims of these violations and the survivors, they do deserve justice. So we have always been actually calling for these trials to take place. And when the tribunal was set up in 2010, Amnesty International actually welcomed that. But that is not the whole of the story. There is another side to this whole process, and that is there is another side to this whole process, and that is that the people who are accused of these crimes, they also have their human rights, and their human rights should be respected. So we are calling that, on the one hand, the victims and survivors of those mass-scale human rights violations, they deserve justice. On the other hand, the people who have been accused of these violations, they also deserve their human rights to be respected. And what do we mean by the respect for their human rights? That the trial, when it takes place, is fair. That there is no torture.
Do you think it has been fair?
And that there is... Well, we are actually looking at the procedural aspects of the trial. At the moment, we are still not, we haven't finished our research on that, so I will not be able to give you a definite answer. There are aspects of the trial, the legislation, which we have some problem with. For example, the fact that there is a constitutional ban on the right of the defense to challenge the jurisdiction of the trial. So that is something that we have considered.
We'll bring up some of that a little bit more in just a moment, but let's just take a step back for a moment and look a little deeper at the events of surrounding that war in 1971 and give you a little bit of context. What happened during Bangladesh's war. The war was fought over East Pakistan's desire to become independent from West Pakistan. East Pakistanis, initially called East Bengal, believed that power was concentrated in the West and felt exploited by the central government. The two sides went to war in March 1971. And 9 months later, the conflict ended with the secession of East Pakistan, which became the independent state of Bangladesh. But the war continues to cast a shadow over Bangladeshis generations later because of the number of people killed and the atrocities that were committed. Bangladesh says 3 million were killed in what it calls the War of Independence, but others say it was fewer than that. And an estimated 200,000 women were raped, many of them in mass rapes and some while they were imprisoned in what have been called rape camps. Shahriar Kabir, if I could turn back to you on this, and our guest in London, Abbas Faye, has touched on some of this. There are a number of issues surrounding this international crimes tribunal. It was a domestic setup with no international oversight, which has been dogged by some degree of controversy ever since its creation back in 2010. There have been stories of leaked internet calls pointing to the collusion between a presiding judge, the prosecution and the government, and a key defense witness as well, we understand, was allegedly abducted by police outside the court. A lot of questions then being asked about the credibility of the whole judicial process in this case.
First of all, let me respond to what Mr. Mullah said. The way he used those abusive words, I can also use the same abusive word for Mr. Mullah, but I will not go for that. First thing, that what he mentioned about the tripartite agreement between Bangladesh, India and Pakistan that never deals with the crimes of 1971. That was only implied for the prisoners of war, 195 prisoners of war, where they were sent and Bangladesh declared, clemency to them. It has nothing to do with the local collaborators, local killers, like Jamaat-e-Islami, Muslim League and Nizam-e-Islam. There are many Razakar forces were there, Al-Badr forces were there, like Gestapo, SS and SG during the Second World War, what Hitler had. And second thing, the evidence, if you want evidence, the organ of Jamaat-e-Islami, Delhi Shangram, is enough evidence how Jamaat-e-Islami abated Pakistan army in committing genocide, and how they formed Razakar, Al-Badr and Al-Shams, these killing squads for killing, common people, unarmed people, for killing intellectuals, how they blamed these people, the Bengalis, as the agent of India, how they blamed us for being the traitors, the enemy of Islam. So this is what they did. This is the way they have, encouraged their cadres and people to kill unarmed people, particularly the Hindus, particularly the Bengalis, particularly the intellectuals. So they were the main victims, and it is well recorded in their party paper. Well, now we have a tribunal, and this is a tribunal we have given enough, opportunity for the accused that has not been given by, the war crimes trial, what we have seen in Nuremberg or in Tokyo. If you remember those trials where the Nazi war criminals were being tried in Nuremberg tribunal, the defense, they didn't have the right of, the appeal. But our tribunal, our law, has guaranteed the right of the appeal and equal right. The way the, state has got the right, same right the defense is also going to enjoy here. And it is an open, free and fair trial. Everybody can come and they can watch everything. If they have to say something in their defense, they are free to defend themselves. So this is not the matter.
All right, but if this process has been so transparent as you say, why hasn't there been any international oversight, for example? And what about these questions over? Hold on a second. What about these questions? The story of this key defense witness who was allegedly abducted by police outside the court.
Well, that is absolutely false, the propaganda. We know the reverse stories, how the Jamaatis are, threatening the, accusation witnesses. I am one of the witnesses, and I know that what these people feel, coming from the remote areas, they know how fascist party is Jamaat-e-Islami. They have seen Jamaat-e-Islami's brutality during the war, and they are very much afraid, That's why we are asking government repeatedly that you must enact witness protection laws so that witness can come and testify before the tribunal without fear. But, well, I'm not sure whether this law will be enacted soon or not. But still, Jamaat-e-Islami has created a reign of terror in those areas where the witnesses are supposed to come. So this is one story. But what I must say...
All right, just finish your point briefly if you can, Shahriar.
Pardon?
I just want to interrupt because I want to talk about some of the response that we've had on our Facebook page on this. So just give you a sample of some of the views on this. Hannah says, I think the death penalty should be enforced, but only if the trials are fair and transparent. I don't agree with the way they are carrying out these trials, only allowing the defense to have a set of a few witnesses while the prosecution has an endless amount. That goes against their basic human rights, and these trials should be conducted at The Hague, not in Bangladesh. Golap says, we Bangladeshis are united against the war criminals Razakars. That's the name of the militia at that time, back in 1971. And Rashija says the death penalty is the only punishment for war criminals. One cannot run from their sin, but we cannot deny the fact that it will trigger further violence. So obviously a lot of very strongly held views there on social media, and do keep those views coming in because we always appreciate the feedback that we get from our viewers. But Muhammad Abu Bakr Mullah, if I could turn back to you on this, and if you want to respond to what some of what Shahriar has had to say about this.
Okay. First of all, I need to respond to him by saying is that either he does not know the history of the war crimes trials or the collaborators trial, or he's distorting the fact. I need to tell the audience of the Al Jazeera is that the fact is that 100,000 people were arrested after the Liberation War. And out of 100,000, 37,000 were prosecuted. And after that, 752 are punished under the Collaborators Act 1972 for murder, looting, and arson, and killing people. But to try the war criminals, the Bangladesh government had enacted another law that is called International Crimes Act 1973. Under that act, Pakistani prisoners of war are supposed to be tried, and if he reads or you read the Tripartite Act 1974, it is very clear that it is mentioned that it is about trial of the prisoners of war, where 96,000 Pakistani soldiers were surrendered. Out of them, 100,000 were initially identified to be prosecuted and for the trial, and out of them, 195 were finally identified for the trials of the war criminal under the International Crimes Act 1973. Let me finish. So,
just briefly, through
this Tripartite Act, they were forgiven. It is mentioned that Bangladesh can forget and forgive. But what we wanted to say from as a representative of Jamaat Islami, we have demanded several times that there should be a tribunal under the oversight of United Nations or from international community. Otherwise, the tribunal formed by Bangladesh Awami League government.
All right, fine. I want to bring in Abbas Faiz on this, if I can, for the final time, just in the minute that we've got left. I made the point earlier that a lot of these protesters are from Bangladesh's younger generation, many of whom were not even alive when this happened. What do you believe is at play here? I mean, is this part of something larger in the country?
Well, I mean, they are probably expressing their own views and their own feelings, but it is the responsibility of the government of Bangladesh to be very careful about the feelings that are being expressed, especially when people are calling for the death penalty. I think in this situation, it is very important for the government to ensure that the tribunal maintains a very strong level of independence, and does not feel that it is under pressure either from the public or from the government authorities, unfortunately, who have raised some calls in
that is going to have to be the last word. But I want to thank all three of my guests from London, Muhammad Abu Bakr Mullah and Abbas Faiz, and from Dhaka, Shahriar Kabir. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. And of course, for the latest news and analysis, there's our website, aljazeera.com. And join me 24 hours from now for our weekly program, Inside Syria. I'm Hazem Sika. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. News.